Chapter 1. The Requirement Sledgehammer. Step 1. Question every requirement. The ghosts in the machine. In the late spring of 2018, Tesla was in what Elon Musk called production hell. The company was trying to scale the manufacturing of the Model 3, and they were failing. Bankruptcy was weeks away. The factory was a graveyard of broken promises and stalled robotics. Musk began sleeping on the factory floor, not out of a sense of martyrdom, but out of necessity. He realized that the only way to save the company was to walk the line himself and find out why the requirements weren't working. One afternoon, he came across a specific robot that was struggling to install a piece of fiberglass matting onto the battery pack. The robot was expensive, the sensors were complex, and the mat itself was a recurring cost. But more importantly, it was slowing down the entire line. Musk asked the lead engineer, "Why is this mat here?" The engineer replied, "To reduce noise, vibration, and harshness, NVH." Musk then went to the acoustics team, the people responsible for how the car sounds to the driver, and asked, "Does this mat actually reduce the noise?" Their answer was shocking. "We tested the car without the mat, and there was no measurable difference." But the engineering specs said it was required. This is a ghost requirement. It was a rule written by an engineer who had long since left the company, based on a design theory that turned out to be irrelevant. Thousands of hours and millions of dollars were being spent to solve a problem that didn't exist. The first law of the human algorithm is this: your requirements are definitely wrong. It is just a matter of how wrong. Why we live by analogy. Most humans are biologically wired to reason by analogy. This is a survival mechanism. In the wild, if you see someone eat a red berry and they stay healthy, you eat the red berry. You don't ask about the molecular structure of the berry, you follow the analogy. In modern life, we do the same. We look at successful people and copy their requirements. Asterisk successful people go to law school, so I must go to law school. Asterisk successful parents put their kids in 5 extracurricular activities, so I must do the same. Asterisk productive people wake up at 5 a.m., so I must wake up at 5 a.m. These are all analogies. They are copies of copies. The problem with an analogy is that it doesn't account for your specific environment, your specific goals, or your specific physics. When you reason by first principles, you strip away the analogy and look at the atoms. If your goal is financial security, the atoms are not a 401k or a mortgage. The atoms are income, expenses, and asset appreciation. Once you understand the atoms, you realize that the requirement of a 9 to 5 job might actually be a suboptimal way to reach your goal. The Name the Person protocol. At SpaceX, Musk implemented a rule that changed everything. Every requirement must have a name attached to it. In a typical corporate environment, if you ask why a certain process exists, the answer is usually the legal department requires it, or it's company policy. In the human algorithm, this is unacceptable. A department cannot be wrong in a way that you can fix. A department is a faceless, immortal entity. But if you say, Sarah from legal requires this, Sarah becomes a variable you can solve for. You can go to Sarah and ask, "Why do you require this?" You can show Sarah the data that proves the requirement is slowing down the launch. You can negotiate with Sarah. Applying this to your life. Look at your current schedule. Look at the things you feel you must do. Now, put a name on them. Asterisk who requires you to answer every WhatsApp message within 10 minutes? Is it your best friend? Or is it a ghost requirement you created for yourself based on a fear of being disliked? Asterisk who requires you to live in a city with a high cost of living? Is it your employer? If so, what is their name? Have you asked them if you could work remotely? The moment you put a name on a requirement, it loses its divine power. It stops being a law of nature and starts being an opinion held by a person. And people, even experts, are often operating on old data. The authority bias in the lab coat. We have a psychological glitch known as the authority bias. In the famous Milgram experiment, Ordinary people were willing to deliver what they believed were lethal electric shocks to strangers simply because a man in a lab coat told them it was required by the experiment. In your life, the lab coat is everywhere. It's the financial advisor telling you how to save. It's the fitness guru telling you how to train. It's the cultural norm telling you how to live. We follow these requirements because we are afraid of being difficult or wrong. But in engineering, the only thing that matters is the output. If a requirement doesn't lead to a better output, a faster car, a more fulfilling life, a healthier body, it is a dumb requirement, regardless of who issued it. To optimize your life, you must give yourself permission to be difficult. You must be willing to look at the man in the lab coat and ask, "Show me the physics. Why is this required?" The physics of your reality. In engineering, the ultimate judge is physics. You can argue with a manager, you can ignore a marketing requirement, and you can even bypass a legal constraint if you're willing to take the risk. But you cannot argue with gravity. You cannot negotiate with the second law of thermodynamics. If your rocket design requires more energy than the chemical bonds in your fuel can provide, the rocket will not fly. Period. In the human algorithm, we must learn to distinguish between hard requirements, laws of physics, and soft requirements, laws of culture. Most of the stress we experience in modern life comes from treating soft requirements as if they were hard requirements. We treat a social obligation or a career milestone as if it were as unchangeable as the speed of light. What are the physics of your life? Asterisk time. You have 24 hours in a day. This is a law of physics. If you try to schedule 26 hours of work, the system will crash. Asterisk biology. You require a certain amount of REM sleep, specific micronutrients, and movement to maintain cognitive function. If you ignore these, your engine will seize. Asterisk economics. At its most basic level, wealth is value created minus value consumed. You cannot spend more than you produce indefinitely without collapsing the system. Everything else, your job title, your social standing, the brand of car you drive, the requirement to check Slack at 9 p.m., is a social fiction. These are recommendations masquerading as requirements. When you realize that 90% of the walls around you are actually just curtains, the world becomes a playground for engineering. The why audit, digging to the atoms. To dismantle a ghost requirement, you must become a master of the why audit. This is a technique borrowed from the Toyota production system, but Musk applies it with a much more aggressive intent. The goal is to keep asking why until you hit a fundamental truth or a logical fallacy. Let's apply the why audit to a common life requirement. I must own a house. One why? Because it's a good investment and everyone says it's what adults do. Reasoning by analogy. 2. Why is it a good investment for you right now? Because property values usually go up. 3. Why do you need that specific investment vehicle? Because I want to build equity so I can retire someday. 4. Why do you want to retire? Because I want the freedom to travel and spend time on my hobbies. 5. Why wait 30 years for that freedom? Because I need the stability of a home base first. Now look at the atoms. The fundamental desire is freedom and stability. By questioning the requirement of home ownership, you might find that in your specific city, renting is actually 30% cheaper than a mortgage plus taxes and maintenance. That 30% savings could be invested in a liquid asset that grows faster than real estate, providing you with more freedom and sooner. The requirement of the house was actually an anchor slowing down your progress toward your actual goal, freedom. The cost of the maybe requirement. One of the most insidious types of requirements is the just-in-case requirement. These are the processes we keep because we are afraid of a 1% chance of failure. In manufacturing, this looks like redundant inspections that don't actually find defects. In your life, it looks like the just-in-case degree, getting a master's degree you don't need because you might need it for a promotion in a decade. The just-in-case meeting, Attending a meeting where you aren't a decision maker because you might miss a piece of information. Asterisk the just-in-case subscription, paying for software or services you don't use because you might start that project next month. Every maybe requirement is a leak in your fuel tank. In the human algorithm, we don't plan for 100% of contingencies. We plan for the 80% that actually move the needle, and we accept that we will have to engineer on the fly for the other 20%. Dismantling the expert hierarchy. We are taught from a young age to respect the expert. If a doctor, a professor, or a senior vice president tells us something is a requirement, we tend to believe them without question. But remember, experts are the masters of the past. They know how things were done. They understand the analogies that worked in the previous decade. But an expert is rarely a first principles thinker because their status is built on the existing system. When Musk was building SpaceX, he was told by the experts at NASA and major aerospace firms that reusable rockets were impossible. They had decades of data proving it. But the data was based on an old requirement, that rockets should be treated like disposable tissues. Musk looked at the physics. He saw that the cost of the fuel was only 1% of the cost of the rocket. The physics didn't say the rocket had to be destroyed, the experts did. In your life, who is the expert telling you what is required? Is it a career coach? A fitness influencer? Your boss? Take their advice as a recommendation, not a requirement. Test it against your own data. If the expert says you need to network by going to happy hours, but your data shows that you get 10x more value from writing one high-quality article on LinkedIn, then the expert's requirement is wrong for your system. Exercise, the Life Engineer's Toolkit. To finish this chapter and prepare for Step 2, deletion, you must complete the requirement sledgehammer exercise. 1. The inventory. List the 5 tasks or obligations that drain your energy the most every week. 2. The source. For each task, write down a name. Not a department, not society, but a specific person. If you can't find a name, write my ego. 3. The physics test. Does this task directly contribute to a law of physics or a fundamental goal, e.g., generating income, maintaining health, building a core relationship? 4. The 20% challenge. If you were told you had to reduce your requirements by 20% today, or the company, your life, would go bankrupt, which of these 5 would you cut first? Conclusion. Preparing for the purge. Questioning every requirement is a violent act. It feels uncomfortable because it forces you to acknowledge that you have been wasting time on dumb things. It forces you to look at your invisible scripts and realize they are just bad code. But you cannot proceed to the next steps of the algorithm without this foundation. You cannot delete, simplify, or automate a system that is built on false requirements. If you do, you are just making a dumb process happen faster. In the next chapter, we take the requirements that failed our why audit and we do the one thing most people are too afraid to do. We delete them. Not fix them. Not improve them. We remove them from the system entirely. Get your sledgehammer ready. We're moving to Step 2.